Hello and welcome to Video Revealed. I'm Colin Smith. I'm here to talk to you about the secrets about vector graphics. And at the end, I'll show you how to extract vector artwork out of a PDF. All right, I don't care what you do or where you come from. You have to learn why vector graphics are so useful, so important, and so powerful, and how Adobe does a great job of making sure vector graphics look great across the board. Except Premiere Pro, which I'll show you a little tip in there. So first of all, what the heck is a vector graphic? So let me just show you a few different formats. So a file that has a .ai extension is an Adobe Illustrator file. Now, Illustrator files can contain vector and raster. What's raster? Raster is JPEGs, PNG files, TIFF files, image files, your camera files. All of those are raster files. Even video is a form of raster frames. .eps is encapsulated PostScript. Really quick history. Adobe invented PostScript to work with Apple computers to print from PageMaker to the Apple LaserWriter. PostScript was a communication language just going out to printers, and then people wanted to share those things, so Adobe created an encapsulated PostScript, so it's a transferable version of the stuff that would go to a printer. And it's still in use today. A lot of times if you get work done by someone and they give you a logo, they'll most likely give you .ai and .eps and probably PNG. SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics, was a open source format. Well, it's open source now. Adobe invented this format. It almost went away, and then there was a resurgence of vector data. So this is also a very popular, important format. Illustrator can open these and save these very easily. There's DXF and DWG, which are CAD drawing formats. So computer-aided design, think of architecture, buildings, and things of that sort. These are really difficult to edit outside of programs like AutoCAD. And then there's a bunch of conversion formats that will get you from one format to another. But primarily, it's Illustrator in EPS files. And really, I'll just be talking about .ai files. And they're really, really useful in printed graphics, online graphics, and video. Now, I want to show you something interesting. This actually is vector. So this is from Bruno Bernardo, and it is using a whole bunch of gradient meshes. You can see all the millions of lines in here to make what looks like a photograph. It looks absolutely incredible. The problem with this kind of artwork is it's impossible to change without selecting a million points. It's really, really difficult to change. And worst of all, the more complex this is, the more a chance that you cannot print this or export it or import it. So it looks amazing. I think this is kind of a pissing contest to a lot of guys. You can do the same thing in Photoshop or other kinds of art. Why do this in Illustrator? Anyway, sure, you could scale it up, but seriously. And as I say that, here's an example. I did this, and this is also a mesh. This is a picture I did of my mother and put that on a card. So instead, we're going to use this guy here. And I'm using this as an example because we've got very tiny little pieces in here to help us understand what vector really is. So vector. Now, although I could put an image in here and export this out as an Illustrator file, let's not talk about that because primarily we're talking about graphic art created in a vector format. And if you hold the Control key on Windows, Command on the Mac, and type the Y key, then you'll see this outline mode. It's also in the View menu, Preview Outline. And this shows you that this is made up of, I'm going to grab the direct select tool and show you that I can select each one of these little pieces in here. This is why vector artwork is so freaking powerful. Because if I wanted to select these shapes here and make a change to them. I could select them and I could recolor them. I could do whatever I want. If this was a Photoshop file, a flattened Photoshop file or a JPEG or a PNG, trying to select those colors would be brutal. Here, I could select all of that color and change it. In fact, if somebody put this together correctly, they could actually put things on layers. So you select a layer and it instantly selects the other pieces. Now the type here is type. So when I look at this in a preview, you can see it's dark, but if we converted that to outlines, then it would be another shape. So this is exactly what you want to have from a client if you're going to animate their logo or motion graphics or things like that, or even for print or the web. If you get the vector format, oh boy, you can do anything you want. Now, although this looks like a normal size, it's actually quite small. If I click over here and go to the artboard settings, now this is set up in pixels. So this is only 388 pixels by 223 pixels at 72 pixels per inch. That's like a typical crappy web graphic. You're not about to size this up to an HD screen or to a billboard. It's going to fall apart unless it's vector. If it's vector, that means the same file size, I mean the physical size of this file, which if we look at this Buffalo is 720 kilobytes in size. If we made this 20 feet by 20 feet, it would still be the same amount of data of the file size, but it would make a huge file. So we can reuse that for something like that. In fact, I'll just show you here that if you go to attributes and select everything, and then go to document info, you can actually see things like, well, if we just let's grab this guy here. And the little flyout menu, go to objects. You can actually see how many paths are in here. So all of the information is available. By the way, I use this, and I'll show you a quick example for an ad that I worked on years ago where this is interesting, where the Bell was claiming that they were converting that many customers and they bought a 2-page tabloid spread in a giant newspaper ad. Somebody complained that the amount of ticks were not accurate. So they had to come back to me. Did I count them? No, of course I didn't count them. I copied and pasted and noodled them around so they look different. I went to attributes, file, objects, boom, showed them so their legal department could come back and say, yes, those ticks were the exact amount. I digress. Okay, so this is a .ai file, and you can save this as a number of formats, very useful formats like PDF, EPS, or you could export this out as all of these formats. So again, we could go out to other vector formats like CAD, but image formats, BMP is an image format, JPEG, PICT, PNG, Photoshop. There's SVG. TIFF is a raster format. SVG, as I mentioned, is a vector format. So out of Illustrator, we could go to a number of image formats. So if somebody wanted this as a JPEG, no problem, as long as I've got this as a vector format. So next up, let's talk about taking this to Photoshop. And I'll get to Premiere Pro and to After Effects in a second. So what I'm going to do is select all of this and copy it. Go to Photoshop, and if you paste, you'll actually get 4 choices. Smart Object, which means you'll be pasting in the full quality vector Illustrator file. Absolutely amazing. Excellent if you want to retain that format. You can bring it in as pixels. This is converting vector to raster, and the term is called rasterizing. You're rasterizing this output. You could bring it in as a path, and this could be a mask path. Paths you can't see. They're stuck in paths. You can make this a shape layer, which I'll show you this one. Click OK, make it a shape layer, but now it's one, whoops, it's one solid color, so you would have to individually grab each one of these and recolor it. Oh, it'd be a nightmare. So instead, as I mentioned, let me throw this away. Paste that in as a smart object, click OK. It comes in as a smart object. And if you resize this, and resizing has changed in Photoshop, you don't have to hold the Shift key to constrain this. I will add the Alt key on Windows, Option on Mac, and drag this up. And now let's look at this. This looks good. And if we go back to Illustrator, I want to show you something that will definitely confuse you. Let's go zoom in Illustrator. And you can see no matter how far I zoom in Illustrator, I get beautiful smooth edges. And you think maybe that should be the same way in Photoshop, and it's not. That's because this document has a raster size. So it's only 72 pixels per inch. I could change that if I want. Even though this is vector data, as it sits in Photoshop, it's essentially raster, because eventually you're going to flatten or export or print or send this out. And all of those operations convert vector to raster. You can't get around from that. Can't get away from that. That's not a bad thing. That's just part of it. It's just great that as a smart object, hit Command-T, Control-T, and every time I scale this up and down and up and down, it's going to look great. Now, if you want to convert this to raster, you can right-click. Now, let me duplicate this, though. I'll turn it off, turn one off, and I'll convert this to raster. And it looks the same because it's the same quality of data. But if we do the same thing, where I take this, scale it down, hit enter, scale it up, get ready for Barfola. Yikes! What the heck is that? So if we look at the original below it, this is what happens when you scale raster data, pixel data. When it gets small, all of that information is thrown away. And when you drag it up bigger, it just looks like crap. You can't get away with this. And you can scale things up a little bit, but you're not going to scale pictures up thousands of % and still make them look good. So it's always best, if you can, to keep things vector. So keep it vector as close to the end as possible. The other great thing about this format, if we go back over to Illustrator and I close this, I want to make sure that I didn't make any changes. Watch this. We go back to Photoshop. If you double click on this smart object, it will open in Illustrator. This is not made with layers, but if it was, all of this artwork, all these layers, are all still connected to the Photoshop file. If I put this Photoshop file into Premiere Pro or into After Effects, it would still be changeable from Illustrator to Photoshop to the other end. The vector data will be stopped at the resolution of Photoshop. So this Photoshop file is 1920, 1080, 72. So it's only 5 megabytes in size, but this is a perfect large graphic for HD, or I could make this 4K. If I made this 5,000 pixels by 5,000 pixels, brought in the vector object, scaled it up, it would look beautiful. So you try to keep things as native as possible. Okay, even better than Photoshop, let's go to After Effects. After Effects does an amazing job. Okay, so in After Effects, we first need to create a composition, which is like a sequence in Premiere Pro, and click right there, and we'll make sure it's HD. Click OK. Now we need to bring in our Illustrator file, and you can just double click in here or go to the File, Import, Menu, or you can drag and drop right in here. So I'll double click. There's our buffalo. I'll bring it in. We can bring this in as a composition, which I'll show in a further tutorial, or merge layers, or we can choose a specific layer. I'm just going to merge all the layers as footage and drag it down here in the bottom. And you can see it comes in small, just like it is as an Illustrator file. It's 300 by 300 some pixels. If you tap the S key for scale, you'll bring your scale up. And when we drag that up, we see the same problem. It starts to pixelate as it's scaled up. But this little magic button right here, continuously rasterize. Watch this. Boom. No matter how big I make this, it will always be smooth because After Effects is rasterizing it at this resolution or that resolution or whatever resolution I want. Whatever size you have it at, it will always look good. This is how you're able to fly into the middle of logos in something like After Effects. Somebody gives you, or you're able to get, well, the vector version. Now you can do anything, including this. This is the puppet tool. I'm going to go to the advanced puppet tool and start dropping in some points. This last one here, I'll change the rotation, and I could animate this, so I could animate this shape moving around. And it will always look good and clean and amazing. You can't do that if it's an image. You can only do that if it's vector. Well, without a lot of work. So now let's talk about Premiere Pro. That's the only place that we're going to have a bit of an issue. So let's bring the same thing in. Comes in as a vector graphic. There it is. Let's go to the effects controls. And let's scale it up. And it looks like crap. That's because there's no continuous rasterization inside Premiere Pro. As far as Premiere Pro is concerned, the rasterization quality level is at the original size, meaning 300 by 300 pixels. So this is what I do, and I use Illustrator graphics in Premiere Pro all the time. I physically make a larger size in Illustrator. Let me show you that. Let's go back to Illustrator. And there's this button over here that again gets us to our artboard size. And I'll change this to 2000, tab 2000, Control Command 0. I'll grab this arrow, select it. Illustrator, you still do have to hold Shift, so I'm holding Shift and Option on Mac. Alt key on Windows, I'm dragging this up to be that size. Now, it's not square, so I'll probably just get rid of this. There is a command I'll show you here to fit artwork to bounds. I just get a little paranoid when it gets close to the edge, so I tend to make this a little bit larger. So now I've got something that's 2000 by 2000 pixels. So let me save this as and I'll save this as an L for large. And I'll just click OK. There are multiple versions of Illustrator. I'm going to click OK. Let's go back to Premiere Pro, import in the new large one. There's the large one. And the first thing you'll notice when I drag it in, already it's going to be huge. And I haven't scaled this up at all. So if I do want to scale this up somewhat, I mean, there's almost 300%, and that looks pretty darn good. But if we wanted this as a logo, now we can place this anywhere we want, and it's going to look good. And I would even do this if it was a motion graphics template that I'm working with. So in Illustrator, 2000 pixels by 2000 pixels is a really good default size to put big ass graphics in here. And remember, it doesn't make this huge. This is not a giant multi-megapixel image. It's a small vector because it's really the mathematics of those shapes. But now I can use it in here. So Illustrator into Photoshop, Illustrator into After Effects. You don't have to change anything. And in Premiere Pro, you do. So the last thing I wanted to show you was, let's say you're trying so hard to get a freaking logo that's vector. You're dealing with some market weenie who just, you want to jump through the phone and yeah, and they don't get it. They keep sending you crap off their website. So what you can do is go to their website and look for any marketing material or PR material or branding media that other person is not giving you. If it's a PDF, you might be in luck. So let's go have a look. So here is a PDF that I created, and you can see the logo looks pretty small, right? The logo's over here, but I'm going to go to Illustrator and I'll open the PDF. So just File, Open, select the PDF. It's telling me to preserve some appearance, some text is being outlined. So it's going to look exactly the same. It won't be text anymore, but it'll be an outline. Click OK. So everything is here. And guess what? That is a vector logo. Remember, if we went to our outline, you can see it's a vector logo. If this was a rectangle, then it's an image placed inside the PDF. It's not. So what I do, depending on how this art is created, I don't need this background, so I'm going to use the regular move tool, select it and delete. And I'll select this. And what you might find is that sometimes, see that blue outside? PDFs weren't made to be edited. So even though I'm selecting the logo, it's selecting the logo and the giant bounding box on the outside. If you click on this direct selection tool, not group, but direct selection tool, and just drag from over the edge and hit delete, you've deleted the bounding box, which is part of the PDF information to tell the printer the coordinates of the size of that. So now, and I'll use that same tool. If you use that same direct selection tool and select that, I've got everything selected, copy, new, and now I'll go to a new document, and here on the right, I could just start right from here. I could make this 2000 pixels. RGB color for working with anything other than the print world. Create, paste. Remember, it's very small, so I'll go back to this arrow, Shift and Option, Alt, boom, save it. Now I'm done. Now I don't have to deal with that person sending me those tiny ass JPEGs as a vector logo, and they're asking me to do amazing things with them. I can't. I need the vector. Vector, baby. Vector, 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 vector. Do I make my point here? You're going to be an absolute freaking superstar if you understand all the different ways that you can use this vector art. It's just fantastic. It should always start with vector. Whew. Hey, if you're new to Video Revealed and you found this informative, please take a moment and subscribe. You want to support us more, you can do that through PayPal. There's a link in the description of this video and one on the front of the channel. And you can go visit us on VideoRevealed.com. Till next time, I'm Colin Smith, and it's my job to drag you kicking and screaming into the best way to create artwork with Adobe's tools.